Hi, I'm Clint Jones, owner-operator of Accomplished Auto, and what we're going to do is go over some of the basics of a properly done state inspection, which we do here for you. We make sure your car is properly inspected, all to the state standards, so you won't get any trouble and your car is operating correctly and safe for the roads, because we want to make sure everybody out there has a safe car to run. So just since I'm standing in front of this, we got our company loaner car here, so we're just going to go over a couple things while I'm... All right, so this is our state mandated OBD2 inspection machine. So OBD2 stands for onboard diagnostics. So what this machine does is it not only records your inspection, the safety portion of your inspection, it also records the OBD2 or the emissions portion of the inspection, because part of the safety inspection also is we do make sure that all the emissions equipment as factory installed, the evaporative emissions canister, the catalytic converters and everything are installed. You can't delete or take off a catalytic converter on a car that's equipped with one. And what we'll do is we can log in here, the handheld device, so the OBD2 cable, we got two options there, so there's also a cable under there. And what we do is after the vehicle information is entered into the system, we make sure the check engine light comes on when we first turn the key on, and then the check engine light should go out. So the check engine light needs to be off for a state inspection. So often we might catch that when we first bring it in. And then get into the OBD2 port here and run it through. This will scan the systems, make sure there's no codes, make sure all of the what they call readiness monitors are set, which is, let me turn this readiness monitors are, it'll check for the engine has run all the emission system self-tests. So as you're driving down the road, the computer is constantly monitoring your catalytic converter, your fuel trims, a bunch of things on your car that affect how much pollution your car puts into the air. So what this does, this is make sure that everything is within manufacturer's specifications for pollutant emissions from the tailpipe, which is better for everybody. It improves your fuel economy, reduces your fuel use, as well as making sure the air is cleaner for everybody. So, all right, so one of the things we check here at Accomplished Auto, just to make sure you're safe on the road and that you can see properly down the road, is your headlight aim. So along with just having them work, which is important, is having them aimed correctly so that they shine down the road in the correct method, so they're not too high and blind somebody, or not too low where you really can't see down the road. So we have the aimer and it kind of shows us where it's aimed. And actually on this example, this car actually could use a little bit of a tweak, because on the low beam, you should be a little bit below that horizontal line. So we are a little bit off on this one. When we first go out to get your car for a state inspection, some of the first things we look at is we get in, we start the car up. Often I'll check the wipers and washers, make sure they're working appropriately, because they need to be able to clear your windshield effectively, and these are really good, so these clear well. A couple other issues is making sure the dash illuminates and you can see your instrument cluster speedometer, and when I drive it I make sure your speedometer works. Your odometer is visible and reads appropriately. Also, we'll check your climate. On this car, go to climate, go to defrost, and then we can turn up the blower, make sure the blower works, and we get good heat. I'll feel for heat out of the dash, so that's good. This car does have is check the windows, and I do check them from the master switch, make sure they all work. But I also check to make sure they work from the driver's position. So this one actually, this one's got an issue. It doesn't go up from here, so although down is more important. Locks, door handles, all that's supposed to work as appropriate. So we'll set the parking brake, and we gotta make sure the red parking brake warning light comes on. And also we want to make sure it holds. So this one holds in reverse, and this one holds in forward. So the parking brake is doing what it's supposed to do. This is in your park position, and your switches and your drive indicators all need to work too. And then the other thing is your four-ways. Then often I'll have someone, if they're available outside, just check the directionals, make sure they're working. Actually, in this case, I can see them in the reflection. So along with your aim and operation, all your lights, your brake lights, everything all have to work. Is we will look at, make sure, besides all the doors operating, is any extra tinting. New Hampshire doesn't allow any dark tinting on the rear windows. I mean, no dark tinting on the front windows, and no tinting below a certain level on the rear windows, which we check with a light meter. Just that's for visibility into the car so people can see occupants and stuff and out of the car at night. We'll check the tail lights, rear bumper for damage, make sure all the tail lights, the plate lights work so the plate's illuminated. Your brake lights and everything are working directional so that people can see when you're stopping so you don't get rear-ended. Checks under the hood for state inspection besides as part of our courtesy check, which makes sure all your fluids and everything are full, is we make sure that the belts are in good condition, that they aren't going to break and have a loss of power steering or power. This particular car doesn't have a battery under here, but if there's a battery mounted under here, this one's in the trunk, but you also have to make sure that's secure. The battery has to be securely mounted so it doesn't get dumped over or shorted out or cause any major issues. Just general safety items like that under the hood. I'll bring it up usually to a nice height for me to look under here, and we'll look with a light, make sure there's no broken springs, leaking shocks or struts. We also, when it's on the ground, we do a bounce check on the shocks, make sure they don't have too much bounce. And then we can firmly grab the tire. On this style of suspension especially, it's easy to do, is check for any play in the front suspension or steering. And that's usually, the allowances on that are usually set by the manufacturer. Some vehicles do allow some play, other vehicles don't allow any play. Then the other thing to do is we take a gauge and measure the tread depth. And this one has 5/32, which is plenty. The state is 2/32 of tread depth. We also look for any damage or worn cords or anything hanging out the edge of a tire. So we inspect the tires, make sure they're decent for use. 2/32 is the bare minimum. And of course around here with snow and stuff, I wouldn't recommend that for the winter time, but as far as state inspection goes, you're okay there. Make sure those have plenty of tread depth, no play, anything going on there. The other thing I do is I also spin all the tires, because sometimes you can have a parking brake or a brake that's dragging or stuck, which would obviously need attention because you can't have a dragging brake while you're driving down the road. All right, and then once the car is fully up in the air, we can look under here. We can look for any severe rust, rusted out bumpers. There's a bumper frame under here. That's the actual structure for if you're hit by somebody, keeps you from getting injured. So make sure that's not rotted out or falling apart. Exhaust, these rubber hangers, often we'll find those torn. You don't want your exhaust dragging on the ground or falling off on the road, so we gotta make sure that's all good. More on this particular car, springs here on the shocks here, make sure none of those are broken, which we don't have any here. No severe rust, no fuel tank issues, damage, straps rusted out. Rear brakes, on these are drum brakes, so you inspect them through the inspection hole and make sure that there's plenty of tread depth. And on drums, 2/32 is minimum. Looks like we've got about 3 or 4/32 here, which is plenty on drum brakes. Fluid leaks or anything on the brake lines. So any leaking brake lines or fuel lines are obviously an inspection safety issue. Rocker panel rust, any place where you could have holes in the body where exhaust and other things could get up inside the car is not a good thing. So we got to check for all that. Same thing with exhaust all the way down, all the hangers, no leaks, nothing coming there. Then our front links, you actually technically can have these be loose and noisy. So sometimes you'll have one that'll be loose on your car and you'll hear it clunking away. That actually technically is okay for a state inspection. However, it usually means that they're getting towards the end of life. But if they're actually broken off, then that's a failure for a state inspection. And then on the front brakes, again, we can take the gauge. We usually take one wheel off at least so we can get a better look. But here we can do a quick check with a gauge. Millimeters of pad, which is plenty. And then the rotors can't be all rusty. So this is the rotor, and it's got fairly clean metal on it. So this is actually a good rotor. There's nothing wrong with that one. But if they're all rusted and pitted, they either need to be cleaned up or replaced, depending on if there's enough material to do that with. So that's kind of the basics of the underneath check, of course. Here, so part of our inspection too is making sure your registration is correct. So it's really, we need to have this registration to put it into the system by the VIN, so that all gets recorded. When we're done, it prints out a report with all the safety or OBD2 inspection report. Sticker by state law has to be in the driver's side lower corner of the window, within 2 inches of the bottom and 2 inches of the side. So if you do have any other stickers here for a dump or anything, because this is a fairly recent thing New Hampshire started doing, is we will have to remove and move any stickers that were over here. You may run into an issue where we may have to move a sticker for you.